So, you know that feeling when you really want to achieve something? Maybe like finally learning to play that guitar that's just sitting there?
Oh, yeah. You spend hours watching tutorials.
Yeah.
Maybe even buy some fancy new picks or sheet music.
Exactly. But the guitar itself, barely touched. You're, deep in research mode.
Uh-huh.
And it feels like you're making progress, but are you actually playing even a single chord?
Right, that gap between wanting and doing. We've all been there.
Well, today we're diving into something that really helps bridge that gap. It's this crucial difference between what the source calls motion and action when it comes to building habits.
Exactly. And it's a core idea for making new habits actually stick.
Yeah.
And honestly, it has some pretty surprising implications for how we tackle our goals.
And we've got this fantastic story to kick things off. It really brings the point home. It's from a film photography class, of all places.
Yeah, it illustrates perfectly why sometimes our best laid plans, all that preparation,
Yeah.
doesn't actually lead where we think it will.
So, our mission for this deep dive is to really get under the hood of why taking those first steps, focusing on the doing, the repetition, why that beats trying to nail down some perfect, elaborate plan before you even start.
It's about understanding what really drives progress, isn't it? What actually moves the needle.
Okay, let's jump into this photography experiment. It was pretty fascinating. Picture this. You're a student at the University of Florida, film photography class, Professor Jerry Olsman.
Uh-huh.
Day one, he splits the class straight down the middle, two groups.
Yeah.
Group one, their entire grade depends purely on the number of photos they turn in, just sheer quantity.
Right, like 100 photos gets you an A, 90 gets a B, that kind of thing.
Exactly that. Simple. Volume is everything.
Okay, straightforward enough. What about the other group?
The quality group. Now, they had what sounds like an easier job. They only had to submit one single photograph for the whole semester.
Just one, but I bet there was a catch.
Big catch. That one photo had to be nearly perfect, as the professor put it. Exceptional quality was the only thing that mattered for their grade.
Wow. Okay, so intense pressure on that single shot.
Totally. And you'd think, naturally, that the students pouring all their effort into crafting that one masterpiece would produce the best work, wouldn't you?
That's what intuition suggests, yeah. Focus leads to quality.
But here's the twist. End of the semester, Professor Yulesman looks at all the work, and guess what?
Let me guess. The quantity group did better.
You got it. Almost all the truly outstanding photos, the best ones in the entire class, came from the quantity group.
Okay, wow. That is surprising. Why? What was going on there?
Well, think about it. The quantity group, they were constantly doing, they were taking pictures all the time.
Just getting the reps in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Experimenting with composition, messing with lighting, spending hours in the darkroom, actually developing prints.
So they were learning through sheer volume of practice, making mistakes, figuring things out.
Uh-huh. Every attempt, good or bad, was a learning experience. They were getting constant hands-on feedback through action. Hundreds of little lessons.
Right, right. Each click, each print developed was like a mini feedback loop, honing their skills.
Now contrast that with the quality group. What do you think they were doing most of the time?
Well, if they were aiming for that one perfect shot, probably a lot of thinking, theorizing, maybe researching.
Precisely. They were likely stuck in planning mode, thinking about the perfect photo, maybe scouting locations, debating techniques, but not actually taking that many photos.
The pressure of perfection kind of paralyzed them, maybe?
It seems like it. They ended up with very little practical, hands-on experience compared to the other group.
And the result was average photos.
According to the story, yeah. Very little to show for all that strategizing, and the final submissions were generally pretty mediocre.
Wow, that really hits home, doesn't it? You can totally see how that applies elsewhere.
Oh, absolutely. Like wanting to start writing, but only ever outlining articles. Or planning that perfect workout routine forever, but never actually lifting a weight.
Or researching diets for weeks without changing what you eat. It's that urge to get everything just right before you start.
And that brings us right back to this key distinction. Motion versus action.
Yeah, it sounds simple, maybe just semantics, but getting this difference is, well, it's fundamental to making progress.
Okay, so let's define these terms clearly. Motion, according to the source. What is that exactly?
Motion is basically all the stuff you do that feels like progress, but doesn't actually produce a result on its own. It's the planning, the strategizing, the learning about the thing.
Like outlining those blog posts we mentioned, or researching 5 different running shoes, but not actually going for a run.
Exactly. You're busy, you're engaged with the topic, but you haven't produced the outcome yet.
Okay, so then action is.
Action is the behavior that delivers an outcome. It produces a result.
So not just outlining the post, but actually writing a paragraph.
Right. Or not just researching running shoes, but putting some pair on and going for that run, even a short one.
Not just talking to the trainer, but doing the workout.
Precisely. Action is the thing that gets you closer to the finish line, even if it's just one small step.
And it's so easy to get stuck in motion, isn't it? Because it feels productive. You feel like you're moving forward.
It does. But as that photography class showed us, all that motion doesn't automatically translate into results. It's necessary sometimes. Sure, you need some planning.
Right, you don't want to run completely blind.
No, but motion alone isn't enough. It often becomes a substitute for action.
Which raises that question. Why do we do that? Why do we often prefer motion, even when we know action is what gets results?
Well, I think a big part of it is safety. Motion feels less risky.
How so?
When you're planning or researching, you're not really putting yourself out there yet. You can't fail at planning, can you?
Huh. Good point. No one's going to judge your research document. Well, usually.
Exactly. But when you take action, when you write that paragraph, or take that photo or try that recipe, suddenly there's a result.
Yeah.
And that result might not be perfect. You might fail.
Ah, so motion lets us feel productive while avoiding the potential pain or embarrassment of failure or judgment?
Pretty much. It's comfortable. You're learning, strategizing, feeling in control. But you're also avoiding the messy reality of actually doing the thing, making mistakes, and iterating.
So motion can actually become a form of procrastination, a very convincing one.
That's a great way to put it. We tell ourselves, I just need to learn a little more, or I need a slightly better plan, but really,
We're just putting off the actual work, the practice.
yeah, the preparation becomes the barrier to the practice itself.
Which brings us neatly to the real engine of change here, repetition. The source really hammers this home. Mastering something, building a habit, it's not about being perfect from day one. It's about getting your reps in.
You don't need the world's best strategy to start. You just need to start practicing consistently.
And the cool thing is how our brains physically change with that repetition. It's not just metaphorical.
Absolutely. Neuroscience shows this really clearly. When you repeat an action, the neural pathways involved literally get stronger, more efficient.
Like carving a path in a forest? The more you walk it, the clearer it becomes.
Exactly that analogy. It's often called long-term potentiation. And you know that saying, neurons that fire together, wire together?
Hebb's law, yeah. That's it, isn't it? The biological basis for learning and habit.
It is. And we see physical proof of this in people with specific skills. You mentioned musicians earlier.
Right, often having a larger cerebellum, which is involved in motor control and coordination.
And there are studies on mathematicians showing increased gray matter in brain areas linked to numerical processing.
The inferior parietal lobule, I think.
That's the one. And interestingly, the amount of gray matter often correlates with how experienced they are. More practice, more brain change.
And the classic example, London taxi drivers, with their famously enlarged hippocampus for spatial memory.
Right. Navigating those incredibly complex London streets day in, day out literally reshapes their brains.
And didn't that research also show it shrinks again when they retire?
It did, which is just amazing. It shows how plastic, how adaptable our brains are based on what we repeatedly do. Use it or lose it, quite literally in that case.
It's not even just a modern scientific idea, is it? I think the source mentioned a 19th century philosopher.
George H. Lewis, yeah.
Yeah.
He wrote about how new skills feel incredibly difficult at first, requiring so much conscious effort.
Mm-hmm.
But as you repeat them over and over, those neural pathways get paved, become smoother, and the action requires less and less conscious thought. It becomes automatic.
So every single time you practice, every repetition, you're activating and strengthening that specific brain circuit for the habit or skill.
You are physically encoding the habit into your brain structure.
That's why getting your reps in is so crucial. It's the biological mechanism at work.
And it loops right back to those photography students, doesn't it?
Totally. The quantity group was constantly firing and wiring those photography circuits through active practice.
While the quality group was mostly just thinking about firing them, big difference in outcome.
Okay, so this leads to the idea of automaticity, right? Where the habit just happens.
Exactly. Automaticity is the point where you can perform the behavior pretty much without thinking. It becomes second nature, like brushing your teeth or driving a familiar route.
Your non-conscious mind takes over, which frees up your conscious mind for other things.
And the source talks about this concept of the habit line.
Right, like an imaginary threshold. Tell us about that.
So imagine when you start a new habit, it takes a lot of willpower, a lot of conscious effort, right? You're below the habit line.
Okay.
But each time you perform the habit, each repetition, it gets slightly easier. You move closer to the line,
And eventually with enough reps.
you cross the habit line.
Yeah.
And from that point on, the behavior feels more automatic than effortful. It takes less conscious push to get it done.
And the key driver for crossing that line is?
Frequency. How often you do the behavior. It's the number of repetitions that matters most for building automaticity, not just how many days or weeks have passed.
That's such a crucial point. We often hear things like, it takes 21 days or 66 days to form a habit.
Yeah, those are averages from specific studies, but they can be misleading.
Hmm.
The real question isn't how long will it take? It should be how many repetitions will it take?
So someone doing something twice a day will likely automate it faster than someone doing it twice a week, even over the same time period.
Absolutely. The brain cares about the practice frequency. Think about the habits you have now that are completely ingrained: tying your shoes, making coffee.
You've done them thousands of times.
Exactly. Hundreds, probably thousands of repetitions built those habits. New habits need that same kind of consistent practice to become truly automatic.
So while we can't put an exact number on how many reps it takes, it varies by person and complexity of the habit.
The principle is solid. Focus on action, focus on practice, focus on consistency. That's what builds the automaticity.
It really ties back to that idea of making habits easy, doesn't it? The more you repeat it, the easier it literally becomes in your brain.
That's the essence of it. Action and repetition pave the way.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. Key takeaways from this deep dive.
Well, first, the power of action over just motion. Remember the photography class doing beats over thinking?
Right. Planning has its place, but it's not a substitute for actually doing the work.
Second, repetition is king. That's how we learn, how skills develop, how habits form. It physically changes our brains.
Getting those reps in literally wires the habit.
And finally, habit formation is driven by frequency, by the number of repetitions, more than just the passage of time. Focus on consistency.
So for you listening, the main message here is really about shifting your focus. If you feel stuck in planning mode,
Try to move into action mode. Don't wait for everything to be perfect.
start small, take that first step, and just focus on doing it again and again, even if it's imperfect.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to chew on. Think about one area, just one, in your life right now where you've been stuck in motion for a while.
Yeah, where you've been doing a lot of planning, researching, thinking, but not much actual doing.
Okay, got that area in mind. Now, what's one tiny action? Something that produces even a minuscule result that you could take today.
No matter how small, just one thing to start getting those reps in.
Just one tiny action. That's how you break out of the planning trap and start making real progress.
Go get that first rep in. Start today.